Plotting versus pantsing. The writing community loves to debate which one is better or which one is more effective. And honestly, I think the answer is right in front of us. Hi, I'm Karina. I'm a self-published author of 2 books, and I'm here to help you learn how to dive into your creativity and harness your chaotic energy to help make you more productive with your writing. If you clicked on this video, you're probably a pantser. I think that just comes naturally for most of us that are self-dubbed chaotic writers. Whether you call it pantsing or discovery writing, it means the same thing. It means you're flying by the seat of your pants when you dive into a writing session, not really having a plan of what you're going to do or how you're going to make the scene work, versus plotting, which is where you usually go into great detail ahead of time, planning out your story, the setting, the characters, the world system, all of that stuff. And honestly, I think we ask the wrong question as the writing community, whether we should plot versus pantsing. And I think it should be, what level of plotting do you need? Because while there are authors that do everything completely as a discovery writer, I don't think until you are very practiced at it that it's very efficient. I think it probably takes years to get to that point. So to begin with, I think it is helpful to know how to plot in a way that works for you. So that's the important part, is not to see everybody else's big, elaborate 40-page plots that they put together beforehand. If that's not you, that's okay. There is a system and a way to make it work for you where you can still use that chaotic pantsing energy to move your story forward, but have something to fall back on when you have those moments where you get stuck. The important thing with writing is to realize that it's a craft. You have to constantly be working at it to become good at it, no matter which way you go. You can build elaborate plots and know every single detail of your story, but once you sit down to write it, the dialogue is bland, the characters are flat, the world doesn't make sense or doesn't come to life around us. And on the other side of things, you can be a chaotic writer and, have these characters that they feel alive to you, and you discover things as you go, but when you look back at it, it's a jumbled mess and the plot doesn't make sense, and maybe the characters' relationship, how it builds, doesn't make sense at all. So really what it's about is discovering which one you are to know which path you need to take and learn how to hone the skills on that specific path. If you are naturally a pantser, you will probably never be the person that has a 40-page plot figured out for your book. That's okay. And if you're a plotter, you probably will never want to sit down and just start writing with zero clue of what's happening. But the important thing is to know to find mentors and other writers that are like you that can help you figure out the most efficient process for you and what's going to make sure you can build that amazing story. I recommend always reading books on craft. YouTube with other writers is a fantastic free option. But the important thing as a writer is to consistently practice and build your craft so that you can have a finished, beautiful story at the end that you are really excited and proud of. And knowing how to plot a tiny bit will probably help get us there. I have 5 tips for what I've discovered, my plotting method that works best for me, that I'll share with you, and you can see if any of them work well for you. Step number 1, don't worry about having it all figured out. I think a lot of times where people who get heavily into plotting fall into a trap is they feel like they have to have their whole story figured out before they can start writing. And I know people who will spend years plotting out a story instead of just sitting down and writing it. So that's one of the benefits of being a pantser, is we like to usually dive into the story, but it is good to plot it out a little bit, even if you don't know everything. So what I like to do is treat my first plotting session as more of a brainstorm session. So go into it and just write down everything that you know about the story, whether that's the characters, whether that is the time period or world setting you have it in, even if it's just one scene that you have in your head, write that down. Because what you're going to do later is come back and refer to that and be able to build off of it. Often when I do this first step, it is when I'm working on a completely different project. And so it's actually an idea for a story that I won't touch right now and maybe for a while. But because I got the basic plot out, I know I can come back to it at any point and refer to those ideas and build off of them. So don't be afraid when you're plotting to kind of stumble through it. You don't have to have it all figured out. At this point, you just need to write down what you do know, and we'll move forward from there. Step number 2, start writing. So I think this is it kind of goes along with step number 1, where a lot of people get stuck in step number 1 with plotting it out. Just dive into the story. Once you dive into it, I think for most chaotic writers and pantsers, you'll find that it only takes a little while for you to realize what parts of the story you don't know. Is there a character you don't know very well? Do you not know how they're going to reach their goal? Do you not know one of the side missions they have to go on? As you start writing, you're going to figure out these things. And so it's important that you start that process so your brain can begin thinking of solutions for those things. If you never start, you're not going to know what questions you do have. And so even if you have an elaborate plot, just dive in. It's okay. Because as we go through, you're going to get practice with writing. I think that's essential, especially for pantsers, is to have that practice of building up your craft. If you don't know your craft, it doesn't matter how creative of a pantser you are. It doesn't matter if you're a plotter and you have this elaborate plot. If you haven't worked on your craft, you're not going to be able to get a good story out. So start the writing process. It's okay. We can come back and refine a plot. We can revise a draft, but you have to start writing to give yourself something to work with. Step number 3, write down questions as you write. So like I mentioned, you're going to have things come up while you're writing, hopefully at least, that you realize, hey, I don't know what I'm doing with this part. I don't know how this character gets from point A to point B. And so because of that, what we're going to do is we're going to have a Word document or a notebook near us. And as you write, you're going to write down questions that come up. Questions are essential for any story. So you as the author are going to have questions about your book as you write. Your readers are going to have questions as they read through it. They're essential for any good story. If your reader doesn't have questions, they're not going to continue reading. So to make a satisfying story, you as the author need to plan when you're going to plant questions in the reader's mind and when you're going to provide them the answers. As we're writing, though, sometimes we don't even know those answers. So you're going to have a notebook or a Google Doc or a Word document near you while you write. And as you write and you realize those questions, write them down. And then when you think of their answer, write that down as well. That way, when you finish draft 1 or draft 0, you can refer back to it, see if there are any unanswered questions that you do need to spend some time thinking and plotting on, or if you've answered them and maybe just need to refine them or maybe come up with a better solution than what you have there. Step 4 is know the purpose of your chapter. Every chapter in a book must serve a purpose. That doesn't mean that every chapter has to be action-packed or full of romance or anything like that. On the contrary, we all know that to build a satisfying book, you sometimes have to have some slower chapters, whether that's to give backstory on a character or maybe to show us the softer side or just build up relationships and trust. That's totally fine to have those slower ones, but you as the author need to know the purpose of that chapter and why you have it in there. If you go through your chapters and realize you don't know why one exists, that may be a chapter we need to cut. For me, this is part of my plotting process after I finish draft 1 or when I get stuck during a draft. I open up an Excel sheet and I go through and mark down the chapter, whose point of view it's from, if that's applicable, and what the purpose of the chapter is, and then just a couple sentences of how I've fulfilled that purpose with the chapter. We'll use the example of the tortoise and the hare so you can see a visual here. So with the tortoise and the hare, with chapter 1, it would be building up kind of a feeling of competition between the tortoise and the hare, right? We want to make sure that they feel kind of like rivals. And so that way, when the race is proposed, they're both ready to accept and go forward with it. And then with the second chapter, maybe the start of the race. And so we're going to build up some anticipation with the hare off to a strong start and the tortoise seemingly behind and seeming like he just can't catch up. So we're going to build that anticipation there. We want the readers to be concerned about the tortoise and how he, as our good guy, is going to win. Speaking of the tortoise and the hare, my husband and I started a publishing company together, and this is his debut children's book that we are publishing through that company. It is A Herring Battle with Mr. Daring, which is inspired by Aesop's fable, The Tortoise and the Hare. It is super cute. My husband wrote the book and did all the illustrations himself. They are absolutely adorable here. So if you yourself like picture books, or if you know of any kids in your life who like pictures books, definitely check out the link below. I will pin the link to the pre-order, and so that way you can get your copy once it comes out. The release date is going to be August 31st of this year. All right, and on to our last tip, tip number 5. Don't be afraid to ditch the plan. Without fail, no matter how often I plot out a story, while I am writing it, I somehow deviate from the plot that I have written down. No matter how detailed or how broad that it was, somehow at some point I'm going to go away from it. And honestly, that is one of my favorite parts of writing. I love being a discovery writer. I love being a chaotic person who I don't know what I'm going to do fully when I sit down to write, and let my characters speak for me and see where the story takes me. That is one of the things I love about writing and what got me into it. So don't be afraid if that happens to you. Your plot can change. The main thing is to make sure that you realize when it changed and know how that impacts the rest of the story. Are there other things that you're going to need to figure out? Probably. But again, that's okay. The main thing is you as the author being aware of what the plan was to know when you deviated from it, so you can plan accordingly and move forward from there. All of this is about knowing yourself as an author and your story really well. That is how we craft a really good story. You can't go into it knowing nothing. If you do, you're going to find that your draft 0 or draft 1 really doesn't make a lot of sense, which is okay. We all know the first draft is pretty terrible for all of us and needs revising. But if you know ahead of time, or you know your process of planning and how to find the questions of your story and know which ones you need to answer, you're going to find that the story flows better and you have a more cohesive arc for your characters and story itself. All right, that's all I have for you today on plotting versus pantsing. Let me know down in the comments below which one you feel like you are, and if you have any other tips or tricks when it comes to plotting out your stories to make sure that you get the best results. Join me next week for more Camp NaNoWriMo moments. It's been an interesting week so far. Let me know if you guys are doing Camp NaNoWriMo also. Feel free to send me a buddy request on NaNoWriMo's website. I'd love to see what projects you're working on in your progress. And I'll talk to you next week. Bye. Just as surprised.